Academica Media. From Academica Media Studios in Miami, Florida, it's Big Ideas in Education, a weekly recap of inspiration and innovation in your schools.
Gobble, gobble, education lovers. Happy to have you here this week on Big Ideas in Education. We hope you had a nice, restful Thanksgiving week. We missed you terribly, and we hope that you ate just the right amount of Thanksgiving food, which, as we all know, is too much Thanksgiving food. That is the rule. I'm Ryan Kairalla from Doral College, here with Dr. Sarah Boulos from Somerset Academy Schools. How was your Thanksgiving, Sarah?
Hi, Ryan. I'm doing well. Pretty good, you know. For those of you listening, cards on the table, we're speaking from the past into the future. So I'm going to assume it was lovely, Ryan.
You gave it away! Theater of the mind! Oh, no.
I didn't have the imagination for it today. I was wait,
committed.
what?
I was committed to the charade, but Dr. Phi, ever the integrity-filled, honest education administrator, wasn't going to let us get away with those shenanigans.
Peeked behind the curtain a little bit, but listeners, the reality is sometimes we record ahead of time.
Oh, goodness. Well, happy to have you past, present, or future, Sarah. Tell me, what story do you have for us this week?
There are a lot of unsung heroes in a typical school building. I could be talking about janitorial staff, cafeteria workers, front office, any educator. But I was reading about schools in Alabama who are tapping into a resource that many schools have, although they don't always receive the credit that they deserve. And that would be paraprofessionals.
Amen.
Sometimes called teacher's aides, right? Rehoboth Elementary School in southeastern Alabama has had some significant success with their students, even in the midst of the pandemic. How significant? Despite pandemic complications, Rehoboth second graders had improved reading scores by 60 points from last fall to spring, according to school-wide data. That's 5 points higher than the national average, and a statistic school leaders say that shows their strategy is working. So what did they do differently? Many schools rely on paraprofessionals to give specialized support to teachers, but Rehoboth says trained and experienced aides are key to recent success. The school recently led peer mid to high poverty schools in reading scores and in closing racial and socioeconomic gaps. School leaders utilized Title I aides trained in specific reading programs, such as those targeting phonics instruction, to see these gains. And unsurprisingly, there's a lot of research supporting this tactic. A recent panel discussing a report out of Duke University revealed just that. Kaimona Burke, a national reading expert who pioneered a retention initiative in Mississippi similar to Alabama's, also believes in investing in core classroom teachers is critical. Invest in people, she said during a recent panel discussion. Invest in your teachers, build their knowledge, empower your teachers to stand in front of children every day and know that they are skilled enough to address the different needs, different deficiencies, or challenges that students might bring into those classrooms. Well said.
Oh, gosh. Anything where we're celebrating paras, I'm all for it. I'm here for that.
Absolutely. And I think the fact that they are taking their paraprofessionals, investing in them and training them. I mean, I may have said this on the show before, but I've worked with many teachers. I've worked with many administrators, I should say, who actually started as paraprofessionals in our schools or substitute teachers and went back to school, decided they wanted to invest in themselves and be a part of the school climate. And they are some of the most impactful educators and administrators that I've ever worked with. And sometimes I'm just surprised that they didn't start out as teachers, right? They had started out as paraprofessionals and worked their way up. But my goodness, the impact that they make on a school is incredible. So I think the idea of investing in our paraprofessionals who, if I'm being honest, they're not always paid as well. Well, I should say they're definitely not paid as well. And they're not always given the opportunity to go to trainings or to be around for professional development. The idea that we're specifically going to take our paraprofessionals who already sacrifice so much and have such a heart for what they do and provide them with training to really be making a difference with student achievement. I think that's just, I can think of no paraprofessional that I've ever worked with who wouldn't jump at that opportunity.
Well, I'm a big fan of getting paraprofessionals training because it does lead to great outcomes. And I'm a particularly big fan of what you just spoke about there, Sarah, this potential paraprofessional to teacher pipeline, and getting them so much training that yesterday's paras can become today's teachers. And you had opined, wondering why we're not seeing more of these paras go into the education or the teaching profession right away. And you and I both know that a lot of the times it's socioeconomic. They don't have the ability to get the college credits they need to.
It's so expensive to go back to school.
And so I'm excited, like here at Doral College, that we've built our school of education specifically around partnering with these schools that have identified paras and know the good ones and know they want to be teachers, and actually helping them get those college credits paid for by the school. And then when they come out of college, there's a teaching job waiting for them at the same school where they were paraprofessionals. So they get to come back to the school they know.
Yeah.
Gotta love it.
It sounds like a shameless plug, which it is, but it's really grounded in research. And it's amazing that we're seeing, 60 points of reading gains that's tremendous.
That's huge.
It's huge. And so to see it happening in practice, to see it played out, or see what we're seeing in research played out in the schools, and to see it making a real impact in kids, it's tremendous. And it's obviously it's a practice that I, as an administrator, educator, I'm like, we need to start doing this right away. And talk about the teacher retention issues we're seeing right now. If somebody has had the experience of working as a paraprofessional, they know the job. Let me tell you, there is, oh my goodness, talk about understanding and trial by fire. Substitute teachers and paraprofessionals, let me tell you, I don't know how they have the stomach for that job. And I don't mean this as a joke. It is not easy. It's hard enough being an early educator, right? A new teacher going into the classroom. But if we're being completely honest, the level of respect and the level of just general support for a paraprofessional or a substitute teacher, it's not there. It's really not. So for a person who is that committed to coming back day after day and investing themselves, I can only imagine, this might be another research project I work on in the future, but I can only imagine what the retention would look like for paraprofessionals who enter the field as teachers after investing so much time and education into becoming a teacher.
That would be an exciting study to read. And as sort of a little hint towards the story I'm going to be talking about in the next segment, we sort of have a lot of these sort of ideas in education that stick around mainly because they're the way we've always done things. And there's a lot of, inertia that sort of keeps things in place. And I think one of those things that's always kind of stayed in place is this idea that like teachers need to be isolated, like one teacher to 30 kids, and there's no other grown-ups that are involved, even in the face of a lot of data that suggests things like team teaching can yield great education outcomes. Paraprofessionals teamed up with a teacher can yield great education outcomes. Teachers collaborating on lesson planning and mentoring. Like the more that we can get other adults in the room to make this a team effort is always, the data suggests that there's a lot of great outcomes to be had there. And in the sense of your study, making sure that these paraprofessionals are actually getting the training they need to be able to support that teacher effectively and not just sort of putting any adult in the room.
Absolutely. The research is definitely there about bringing other adults in the room. But I agree that the training part of this is incredible. I'll give you just a personal example. Somebody I worked with many, many years ago, I don't know if they are listening right now, but she was a paraprofessional. Her name was Angie. And when I was an intensive reading teacher, I was working with my students doing a very specific program. This was this very scripted program, which, we could spend lots of episodes talking about scripted reading programs. But it was really tough for me as an educator to work on this program. And I, at the time, Angie was actually a substitute teacher. And if I was ever out, I would request her because she was amazing. But she came to me and she saw what I was doing and she wanted to help. And I asked if I could have her come and be, pay for a substitute, but to have her come and help me. And I trained her how to use the program that I was doing. And the amount of time that I got back as a teacher because I had the support of someone who knew what I was doing, who knew my students. I mean, I'll be honest, a lot of times when we talk about paraprofessionals, we're talking about elementary or early elementary, but as a high school intensive reading teacher that I had her support, I cannot tell you how much, and we say this a lot, right? Teacher time is golden. To get that time back as an educator and to be able to work with my students because I had the support to work this program with fidelity. I don't mind telling you, I was very much opposed to using the program at the beginning, but we saw tremendous gains after we were invested in that. And sometimes it just takes having another adult in the room, like you said, who knows what we're doing. And it's not just about physically having another person present. It's about having someone who understands what you're doing, who sees the vision of what you're doing, who's really there to support you in some very specific ways. I'll be honest, a lot of times I hear from educators, I can't even take a day off because it would be more work. It would be more work to take a day off because of all the things I have to do to prepare, to get things ready. And then when I come back, I know I have to do. I mean, that is not good for anybody's mental health, probably not good for anybody's physical health. I know we're
good for retention for sure.
Not good for retention. That's absolutely right. So to know that you have the support of someone who sees what you're doing day in, day out, knows the programs you're using, is trained in those programs, and will carry out your vision should you not be available, that's tremendous. And then to know that they are there to be your teammate, to be on your side, to be working with your students, whether you're in the classroom or not, whether it's a team teach, a co-teach, an intervention, a group, a pull out, push in, all the different ways we could be using this, it's incredible, and it's gonna help. At the end of the day, it's gonna make things better for children, and that's what we're here for.
Anytime we can hype up paras on this program, we are here for it.
I'm gonna do it. Ryan, what do you want to talk about?
So recently, Sarah, Bill de Blasio lended his thoughts to one of the most hotly debated topics in education policy. On MSNBC's Morning Joe, the former New York City mayor announced his support for year-round school as he eyes his potential run for New York governor. As part of his appearance, where he also announced support for extended school days, de Blasio said, quote, "The school day, the school year, doesn't fit the realities for families, and therefore middle-class people, working-class people struggle to find a way. How do you have a school day that ends at 2:30 or 3 o'clock when parents don't get out of work till 5? How do you have a school year that ends in June when, in fact, kids need options all summer long?" An increasing number of school districts are considering shifting to a year-round model, which would spread out the 10 to 12 weeks of summer vacation into multiple shorter breaks throughout the year. These calls have only increased amid the pandemic. Proponents argue that year-round schooling would eliminate the, quote, summer slide, where students lose knowledge in between academic years, while also ensuring that students can receive school meals throughout the year. Critics of the proposals contend that the academics of extending the school year might only be marginal and are outweighed by the additional costs imposed on school districts. You and I, we've never talked about this, Sarah. I don't know where you land on extending school year, year-round schooling. How much do you hold firm to having that precious summer vacation?
Well, I have a lot of thoughts, as you can probably imagine. But you're right. We've never actually talked about year-round schooling. It's something that I've talked about with a lot of my colleagues, and it's something I'm very interested in. And in the schools that I've seen it happen with, there is a lot of benefits that we could be discussing. So to see, or to even consider a school district as large as New York, or a state, as significant, serving as many kids as New York, to consider it is something really interesting. It would be a huge social experiment, a huge educational experiment that I would be really interested in seeing. A couple of things that really jump to my mind are twofold. So the first thing that comes to mind is what we don't talk about a lot, but the whole idea of, August to June or September to July school year is very antiquated, right? And it comes from when we were a really agrarian society here in the United States, where kids needed to be off for like the planting season or the harvest season, and kids couldn't come to school. That is not the reality of most of the kids in the United States, and definitely not in New York. So that's my first thought, is really the reason why we do things is because we've always done them. As you mentioned earlier in this episode, sometimes
it all comes full circle.
It really does. Sometimes that's why we do things in education, because that's the way it's been done. So is it the best thing for kids? There's a lot of research that says maybe it's not. Second, and this is something that I find really interesting, people talk a lot about teachers craving their summers off. Well, there is a lot to be said for summers off as with regard to burnout. But again, research supports that the potential for having, less of a summer slide and more frequent breaks throughout the year versus just the one summer break might be more beneficial. But
Maybe
is
you
definitely
would need 10 to 12 weeks off if you were getting 2-week breaks. Don't
get me
months.
started on any teacher will tell you it's not really 10 to 12 weeks off. I'll tell you that
True
right
enough.
now. But they will tell you that they do not get paid. And that's what a lot of people don't think about when we talk about these kinds of things. When we talk about cost, teachers, even if they get a paycheck 12 months out of the year, by and large, they are not getting paid for 12 months of work. They are getting paid for 10 months of work, sometimes for 12 months of the year. So if you can think about that, they are getting paid 10 months of the year divided by 12 months. And that's why if they do get paychecks throughout the summer, that is why. So if we're talking about doing year-round school, we need to talk about, 2/12, 1/6, a sixth of a salary increase for every single educator that we're asking to do this. So I think that's something that needs to be considered when we're talking about economically. Is this feasible in keeping schools open? Not to mention school buildings, janitorial staff, facilities, all of that. But it is an incurred expense that needs to be considered. Professional development that might happen over the summer, planning that happens over the summer. When would those things happen? I'm not saying that I'm against it. I'm saying these are things that need to be discussed and considered that I think especially the public maybe is not aware of when we talk about moving from a 10 months to a 12-month situation. There are a lot of things that happen over the summer, a lot of planning when it comes to counselors and just master planning and getting things. If we're being honest, those things start way before the summer, but a lot of things get executed in the summer. And so it would shift what we do in practice significantly. That being said, doesn't mean we shouldn't try it.
I see a potential for education benefits, but I also have to acknowledge that for a lot of school districts, it would be like trying to turn an aircraft carrier. Like there's a lot of stuff about everything that we do that has the summer break baked into the DNA of everything that we have to do with these schools. And so it would be a lot of movement. But, I do think that I would say 75% of the reason why we still have it is because it's just the way we've always done it. I like to tell people in support of this kind of schooling that if space aliens just landed on this planet that had no knowledge of the way we've ever done things, and we told these aliens in this weird hypothetical I'm developing that they had to develop a school system from scratch, there's no way they would create something where you just have a 12-week break at the end and then students forget some of the stuff that they learn over the summer, and then you have to spend like the first 6 weeks remediating what you taught them last year.
It is a bit insane. If we kind of separate it from tradition and what we've always done, it's a little strange. Why do we do things the way that we do? But again, education is the kind of thing that impacts almost every other part of society. And so it's definitely, if something is going to happen in New York, it's going to be a great experiment to see how it might play out in the rest of the country. Yeah.
Now, folks, whereas I am sure that every person within the sound of our voices is all on board with team investing in paraprofessionals, I know that year-round schooling is a topic
it's
where
a hot topic.
The audience is a little more divided, and so we'd love
absolutely.
to hear your thoughts on this. Yeah. Tweet at us at Academica Media with the hashtag Big Ideas in Education. We'd love to hear what you think about year-round school and to get kind of like a stakeholder's perspective on this. I think teachers, administrators, parents, students, all are going to have like differing points of view from their own experience. I remember when I was a young lad and Miami-Dade County Public Schools was debating this very issue, and actually the school board took it up. I had a very strong con view on year-round schooling, mainly because I just really enjoyed not having to go to school for 10 weeks.
I can understand that.
To me, like maybe the point of view of 7-year-old Ryan shouldn't necessarily guide all education policy.
Although I do think listening to students' voices are definitely important and helping to understand why they need those breaks. Maybe giving more frequent breaks throughout the year wouldn't make kids feel like they need such a long break. I don't know. Just putting it out there. And I also would like to say, as we, it's our first episode back from Thanksgiving, but, it's not in secret, just on the down low. But I do want to say, for those of you who are educators listening in the audience, we know very well that this time in between Thanksgiving break, going into the holiday season until winter break, can be a trying one for a lot of our teachers. As we know, some students are just chomping at the bit to get back into vacation mode, and it's not an easy one. So hopefully our episodes can give you a little bit of inspiration, a little bit of a reprieve from that stress, and we hope to hear positive things going into the new year.
Right on. Thank you all for listening to us this week. See you next week.
The views expressed on the preceding program have been those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of Academica, its clients, staff, affiliates, or advertisers.